Hello everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome back to my channel. Those of you who are here for the first time, hi! My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also a writer working on my first novel. And on my channel, I like to talk about the heart of writing, which is the characters, and the heart of the characters is in their psychology. So that's the angle I take on my channel. So I apologize for the late uploads this week. This weekend has been nuts. Technology issues. I didn't feel great, and now there's no water in my apartment, so that's lovely. So that's why I'm late this week. I'm hoping next week we should be back to regular schedule. So this week we are continuing with my types of magic video, and this week we are talking about divine magic. So what is divine magic? Well, kind of exactly what it says. Divine magic is magic that comes from a deity or is put into an item by said deity. And this one, I mean, it kind of depends a lot on your world building because each world has a different type of religion if you put religion in your world. Sometimes you have divine magic that really doesn't have necessarily a deity attached to it, but there is this sense of it is beyond this world. It's not something that mortals can just obtain or create, it's outside of that. So even if we don't know necessarily where it comes from, there's this idea that it's outside of our normal mortal realm. And then you have different types of deities, and different types of deities mean different types of magic. So I'll just go through them real quick because, again, this could probably be an extended series in its own, but we'll just cover the basics here. So when it comes to deities, do you have one or many? That's always the first question. A lot of fantasy stories in particular like to use a lot of different gods because then you have more characters and you can give them each different traits and there's different things they can do. But even within that, you have kind of this idea of each one has, you either have gods that are interactive with the world, gods that just observe, or gods that just don't care. I admit I don't see the ones that don't care very much. This is kind of the idea that they create things and maybe they create objects or items that are cursed or blessed and they just kind of scatter them everywhere. And then that's the end of their intervention. They don't care beyond that. They've essentially done their task and that's it. They don't necessarily keep an eye on the world. They don't necessarily interact with any mortals. They just kind of have done their job and that's it. That kind of magic is, I think with that one, it can be interesting because you have no knowledge to go off of. You just know, a lot of times the characters just know, oh, this came from so-and-so god, this came from heaven, this came from this, whatever. But they have no means of getting guidance on how to use it. They have no means on really knowing exactly what it does. So there's a lot of mystery with that one. So I think that one works really well in like a soft magic system because you don't necessarily have to explain a lot. You can kind of do what you want with it, but you still have the explanation of this was made by a god and the gods in this world don't intervene. So that kind of gives you a lot of leeway. But going along with that, you don't want to give yourself too much because then you have a deus ex machina, and we don't want those. Those take and suck all the tension out of a story. So you can have something that's magical and given magic by a god, but make sure it doesn't turn into a god itself. Let's leave it at that. Then you have the second type, which is essentially gods or goddesses or whatever who make or create things and they observe. They don't necessarily intervene though, but they are usually watching, and this is one where you kind of, I think you start to see the use of like psychics and things like that more because communicating with mortals is okay generally if done through specific means. Like Dreams are a really big one with this type of magic system and this type of religion system. Dreams and prophecies, because they're not, it's not the same as if, you sat down across from somebody and you were talking to one another. It's like, oh, here's what this does, here's what this is for, etc., etc. You don't have that. It's much more vague, and it's usually symbolic. So this is where you get a lot of symbols. So if you have, say, for example, a magical item that is a specific color or a specific shape, maybe that shape has significance in your culture. Maybe they believe it's good luck, maybe they believe it's bad luck. Example from my work in progress, the color white is bad luck. And it varies by the culture, but most cultures associate it with dangers. So there is a sea in my world, it's called the White Sea. And it's called that because it has all this extra foam in it. And if you travel out on it too much, you're surrounded by white mist and you can't see anything. There's islands and stuff that you can run into, and it's generally not encouraged to venture out onto the White Sea. So the White Sea, it is believed, was made that way to keep people from venturing into it and keep them away from danger. So it's thought it was put there as a protection from the gods. So therefore, the color white in their culture is seen as dangerous or indicative of bad luck and things that you generally want to avoid. Another good example, there is a flower that grows that's called, they call it the bleeding flower, because it's solid white except for these red veins that kind of travel down it, and is extremely poisonous. So they have all these different examples of why white is not a good thing. And that's the kind of thing you kind of get with this magic and religion system, is more symbolic than actual information. And the third one is where your gods can directly interact with your mortals. This is kind of like, I think, what people usually think about when they put gods and spirits and stuff in stories. These are kind of like the Greek and Roman gods. They interact with mortals. They sometimes have children with mortals. They will bless or curse people depending on how they're feeling that day. And magic within this system, I think, is a little, I think it has more rules to it. So I think you can have more of a hard magic system with this one, because you usually have an idea of what god it comes from and what exactly it can do, because you usually have myths and legends that surround it that are much more concrete. I have an example of this one in my work in progress too. There is a staff that the Natuba have, and it's pretty short. It's like 3 or 4 feet, and it's solid wood, and it doesn't look like much. I mean, it kind of looks like just a stick you picked up off the ground. But it is kept by the leader of the clan, and it is called the Staff of Natur, who is their mother goddess. Now, the idea is that if you know how to use it, you can turn it into any weapon you want. So if you think you need a sword, it'll turn into a sword. If you need a bow and arrow, it'll turn into a bow and arrow with a quiver that doesn't empty. If you need, a small hunting knife, it turns into that. But the trick to it is you have to know how to use it. And Natur is very picky about who she tells how to use it. So that's kind of the magic that I have in place with that type of magic system. Is there are instructions, there are certain things you have to do. There are amazing things this staff can do, but not everybody can use it, and the goddess isn't going to just appeal to anybody and say, oh, here's how you use it. Not that simple. I think cursed items are a lot of fun too. And the thing I like about this is you can make them either cursed by like your version of like an evil god. You can have them cursed by a good god for a specific reason. Or sometimes you can talk about spirits and like ghosts and things like that when you're doing this, because ghosts and spirits kind of fall into the divine as well, even though they are not technically gods, but they are not mortal, and they're not necessarily magical creatures, but they are outside the mortal realm, so to speak. So they kind of fall into this camp. So regarding divine magic, The main problem I think that people fall into with this one is you're getting magic from a god. So what limits do you have? And a lot of people say, well, there really aren't a lot of limits. And I can see that point because you're talking about magic that is literally outside mortal understanding. So it would make sense that there are no limits, or at least no limits that we can see. So like I said before, though, that can lead to a deus ex machina, and that's not what you want. So what do? Well, how hard is it to get a hold of? How many times can it work? um, I'll give you guys something again from my work in progress. I don't know if it'll be in the main trilogy. It'll probably show up a little later. But anyway, it's called the Miracle Flower. And what it is, it's a little flower. It's like yay big. And it is a multicolored flower. So it shifts from red to orange to yellow to blue, etc., etc., etc. And it appears Nature plants it somewhere, like at random. And it has the ability to cure any illness, any any injury, anything like that. But you have to appeal to Nature, and she has to agree to tell you where it is. And she never puts it somewhere simple. She always puts it somewhere where you have to essentially go on a quest, a journey, and that really stresses and pushes your physical and mental limits to get to it. And then when you get to it, it tempts you. It generally will try and get you to claim it for your own use instead of what you set out to get it for. If you fall into the temptation, it withers in your hands and it dies. So there's a quest and a temptation and a sense of having to overcome to use it. And I think that's kind of where divine magic really gets its limitations, is how do you get to it? This is usually the MacGuffin. This is usually when you're going out searching for it. This is your holy grail. So it's more about the quest for said item than the item itself. And I think that's what makes stories like this work, is there's not so much focus on, okay, now that we have it, how are we going to continue to use it? A lot of times they're almost like a one-shot wonder. It's like, okay, you get it once and you get to use it once, and then that's it. So that can kind of be a limitation in and of itself. But the nice thing about this is when you guys create your own religions and belief systems within your story, you get to make up the rules. What are the limitations on the gods? Do they have limitations? And I always found that to be a fascinating idea, that even the gods have rules they have to follow. Like I mentioned in my other video, with the ancient Greek gods, if they made a vow by the river Styx, they had to stick to it. They could not break it, because that was something more powerful than them. And I like the idea that there is something more powerful than even the gods. That's why I like the immortal versus mortal hero, because the idea that a mortal hero can overpower someone who is immortal by way of their virtues is a really interesting idea. So that is essentially divine magic in a nutshell. I don't see this one as much because, like I said, I think people see a lot of the limitations and the problems that can come with this type of magic, so you don't see it as often. But I think it can be done very, very well. It's just a matter of figuring out, like I said, your limitations and how you are going to present said magic and what you're going to use it for and how you're going to keep it from solving everything. So I hope you guys found this interesting. As always, if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them below. I try to upload on a normal day every Thursday and Sunday. And if you guys like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss when I do upload. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great one.